Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 5th Technical Assistance webinar. I see our cities are still joining. Today we have a very exciting topic, which is the low-speed zones. This is a topic that is very interesting and very critical because this covers most of the urban roads in our cities, all the school zones, the residential areas, and areas where we can really make biggest and first impact in speed management. I see more and more cities joining. That's great. For those who might be joining us for the first time today, which might not be a lot, my name is Sabal Samra, and I'm so happy to have you here today with us. Some general reminders for our attendees. You probably are an expert on this by now. Please make sure you turn on your cameras as much as possible because we want this to be interactive. We are, a group of cities and our TA team. We all know each other by now, more or less. So it's good to see faces. Also, please, at any minute throughout this session, use the chat to share your comments or questions. You can just type them in, and we have several pause moments to go to Q&A. So we will tend to those then. And lastly, when you speak, please try to do so slowly so that our live interpreters are doing a great job with us, can catch every word you are saying. And speaking of interpretation, as always, we do have Spanish and Portuguese interpretation available. You just have to hit the interpretation button, the globe in the bottom right side of your screen to choose your language. All right, next. Now, to get to know who is joining us today, please mention in the chat your name and the city you are joining us from. But also we have a quick Zoom poll to check where you all are at in the low-speed zone implementation. So here's the low-speed zone Zoom poll. What kind of low-speed zones have you tested in your city? So we want to know if you have tested any type of low-speed zones intervention. If so, what are these? So we have several options here: school zones, residential streets with a decreased speed limit, pedestrian zones, whether they have a minimized car access or not, shared streets, tactical urbanism, low-speed zone streets. So those are streets that you just implemented through tactical urbanism, maybe for a short period of time, or maybe none. Maybe you haven't implemented any low-speed zones so far, or other, if you have other options that you've implemented and we have not included here, you can pick that option and also share with us in the chat. We'll give it just a minute to see the responses. Also, a reminder to share your name and your city in the chat so we see who's joining us today.
We have 8 responses to the poll.
Okay, let's start seeing the answers. All right, it seems that there's a lot of you that have implemented a form of low-speed zones, but the majority goes to tactical urbanism, and I think that makes sense. Those are easier, less costly, and allow you to test the different formats. So that's great. And hopefully today you'll learn more about these topics and ways to develop your tactics and techniques to use in implementing low-speed zones. Let's move next and welcome Tatiana from Rio. Good to have you. So let's look at our agenda after the welcome and looking at the objectives of this session. We'll look very quickly at what we discussed last session. Then we have two very interesting presentations today from guest speakers, one on speed management on non-arterial roads and speeds, followed by one on the safe school environments with a case study from Colima, Mexico. And lastly, as usual, we'll look ahead at our next steps in the program. Next. Right. So far, I want to stop here and congratulate you all our cities. You've made a lot of progress. We're a little bit over a midway in our planning phase. So by this point, you have identified the biggest risks in your city. What are the major risk areas? You've mapped the stakeholders that are relevant in the areas that you've identified as focus areas. You learned about speed management, especially on arterial roads. And today you look closer at non-arterial roads, so the rest of the urban areas, and that will prepare you to select the right interventions for the areas you've identified as potential focus areas. So today, as I said, we'll look at the low speed zones, but that will prepare you for your focus in October, which is designing and submitting your intervention ideas, planning for building and submitting your intervention plan in November, leading to launching the implementation phase in 2026. Next. So by the end of this session, you'll be able to identify different tools and effective interventions for the non-arterial roads using 7 principles of speed management. You'll learn practical tools for planning, engagement, and enforcement, especially on school zones. You'll also think of the best ways of using the knowledge you got this session and previous session in implementing and applying the interventions and further advancing your speed management planning. And lastly, you'll, of course, understand what are the upcoming next steps in the program. Also, hello for Gabriela from Mar del Plata. Thanks for joining us. Now let's move on to look a little bit at what we talked about in the last session. Similar to this session, we had also 2 very valuable presentations last session from New York City and Denmark, looking at their ways and approaches for speed management, tackling road safety on their arterial roads. In New York City, they were able to lower the speed limits to 25 miles per hour, around 40 kilometers per hour, of course, with the support of design changes, traffic calming, and infrastructure. They were especially able to expand their cycling on these arterial roads by making them safer, by narrowing their lanes, implementing protected bike lanes, and building refuge islands and bringing in street trees to give that further impression of a narrower road and a safer road. Of course, they also used signalization by introducing pedestrian leading intervals. As for Denmark, they had 2 different approaches depending on how major or minor the arterial roads are. So when there are major arterials with speeds that have to go over 50 kilometers per hour, they had strict separation between the road users, while on arterials more minor, where speeds can go under 50 kilometers per hour, they allowed some mixing of road users, but of course with the help of infrastructure interventions like safe pedestrian and bicycle tracks on both sides of the road, refuge islands, marked medians. They also restricted the access to the major arterial roads through signalization at intersections, and they used synchronized signals. Next. Now, without further ado, I'd like to move to our speakers. Next. Starting with Fred Wegman, a professor emeritus from Delft University of Technology. And you have all of you met before in our previous session with the feedback on your data analysis. Today from Fred, you'll be learning about the 4 recommended guides to plan low speed zones and where to find them, the key characteristics of non-arterial roads, and the 7 key principles of speed management on these streets and roads. Fred, we're very excited to have you with us today. So without further ado, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Siva. And thanks to the invitation to address this audience on this topic. Let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm an emeritus professor, and for many, many years, I was the managing director of the National Road Safety Research Institute in the Netherlands. And I combined it at the end of my career with being a professor at the university. Next, please. When I was preparing myself for this presentation, I was thinking, okay, what do we have? It's always better to build on shoulders, good shoulders. And here I listed 4 excellent guides when it comes to speed management. The green one right under is a guide prepared by the World Health Organization. There are 2 guides from the World Bank and the World Resources Institute. And the middle one, Designing for Safe Speeds, that's a very, very recent one. It was published only 1 week ago. And I was thinking, okay, let's see what these guides are telling us when it comes to speed management, urban speed management, and more precisely for the low speed roads. Next, please. So let me introduce shortly to you those guides and what are the main messages. And I listed that here. First of all, what you see is that they think that speed management is more than just improving road safety. There are other important societal outcomes in cities. We have to address all road user types, not just vulnerable or motorized vehicles, everyone. We need evidence. Of course, we need evidence. Without evidence, we are not making progress. It's important, according to this guide, to have stakeholder support. We have to be flexible because we have to address the situations all over the world, and they are different, meaning that you cannot simply copy-paste solutions we have discovered in this country, or that you can say, well, this is proven in Latin America, so it will be evident in Africa as well. So you have to be flexible, meaning that you have to think about what I'm going to tell you and not just consider this as a kind of a cooking book, and there is no need to think about anything. The next one is dealing with what kind of road types do we have, and is it simply dealing with the road type itself or also with the environment of the roads? And finally, if we talk about speed limits, if you would like to have effects, we need adequate interventions to support changed speed limits. Next, please. Now I come to this new guide, and that's a guide produced by cities, and they have the message to take a comprehensive approach for safe speeds. So don't make it too simple, make it comprehensive. And they identified 3 bullet points: safe speed limits, network and street design approach, and street design itself. And it's important to see what I indicated a little bit in this first slide, is that on the one hand, you have the function of a street, and importantly, we have physical limits of human survivability in a crash. So these 2 elements are critical. Next, please. Again, this guide is also mentioning that it's not just road safety, but there are more goals for speed management. Next, please. And then we come to street design, and again, they emphasize that we need these other goals as well to be included. Next, please. Then I come to a guide, and that's focusing on the topic of today, and that is the low speed zone guide. And that's produced a couple of years ago by the Global Road Safety Facility of the World Bank and the World Resources Institute itself. And it's interesting to see that they are covering the same field. And that's the conclusion I arrived at, that all these guides are more or less making the same messages to us, that we have to deal with speed management in these non-arterial roads, that we have to think about maximum speeds of 30 kilometers per hour, because we know that these have effects, and that we have to be integral, comprehensive, whatever you like to call it, and have to adapt different interventions. Next, please. Based on these 3 guides, I decided to cover 7 areas today. And I listed them for you here. And I'm going to introduce all these 7 elements to you today. So that is to say speed management, but also other sustainable development goals, speed management for all road users. I would like to introduce safe speeds from a safe system perspective. I will talk about safe speed limits, but also credible speed limits. What is the potential for low speed zones? What are you talking about if you talk about adequate interventions? And last but not least, we have to include stakeholders in the decision-making process and the design process in order to have their engagement and support for whatever we talk about. But first of all, we have to address the issue. What are we talking about if we say non-arterial roads and streets? Next, please. When we see the road system in the urban area, then we are certain that we have different road types. And in my view, it's the best to make a road classification based on the function of each road and street in the urban setting. And if you do that, you will get a road hierarchy. In the safe system approach, we distinct 3 functions. The flow function, traveling from A to B, the distributor or collector function, that is a road type in between the roads of a flow function and the roads and streets of an access function. And the third one is the access function. So we have these 3 functions. And what we try to do when we try to improve road safety, we try to design roads for only one function. We call that monofunctionality. So try to identify for each road, for each street, what is the function, and try to limit the function of a road or a street to only one of those 3. That's not easy and not always possible, but the idea is that you have only one function. The next step is that access roads, access streets should be as big as possible. If you need roads and streets for traffic, and you need to make these roads, of course, for that purpose, then you have to do that, but try to make these access roads as big as possible. Try to eliminate through traffic through these areas, resulting in low traffic volumes. You have to accept that vulnerable road users are everywhere in these areas, in these networks. And a final and very important conclusion from the research in the world is that if you try to develop a strategy for speed management, it is impossible to use the crash history. And the reason for that is that crashes, injuries are scattered all over the place. There are no such things as hot spots, meaning that you cannot look for simple intersections and saying, okay, I try to deal with safety in non-arterial roads by addressing one or two corridors or intersections or whatever. And that's different than on arterial roads. On arterial roads, you give that a try. You can do that, but on non-arterial roads, that's not an option, meaning that you have to look for another approach. So that as an introduction of non-arterial roads and streets. Next, please. Speed management is important, it's critical. And we said before, not only for road safety. I fully agree on that. There's no doubt, in my view, that speed management also on non-arterial roads will improve road safety. We have a lot of evidence in the world about that. And I give you the example here, the famous example of the Swedish researcher Göran Nielsen, with his relationship between changes in mean speed and changes in accidents or crashes, as we call them today. And you see these three graphs, and you have seen them before, I hope, indicating that if you increase speed, you increase risk. If you reduce speed, you reduce risk. So that's for sure. And you can be very certain if you try to change and reduce speeds that you will improve road safety. And then you have a sentence on all these other goals as we discussed before. And in this report, this specific report, you can find some pages illustrating this. So if you are looking for reasons why you would like to do more than just improving road safety, go to this report, and then you can see that other sustainable development goals are improved as well. Next, please. It's important, speed management is important for vulnerable road users. There's no doubt about that as well. And in the safe system approach, we have sentences such as the one I've written down here. The human body has a limited physical ability to tolerate crash forces before harm occurs. The system should prevent those limits from being exceeded. So that is a central point in this safe system approach, where you can say, I have to keep speed and the kinetic energy as a result of that, resulting in harm, below a certain level, especially for these vulnerable road users. And we know how to do that. And you know that perhaps as well. First option is that you try to separate modes, give them their own physical space. We do that by having sidewalks, cycle tracks or paths, and these days we see them as well, tracks, separated tracks for power two-wheelers. A second approach is that you would like to reduce exposure to risk by allowing fewer vehicles. And I talked about that if you talk about these low speed zones, that you try to eliminate through traffic red routing. And the third approach then is to lower speeds. So here you have the three main areas where you can act. Next, please. I talked about safe system planning and design. And here I listed for you the design principles for the infrastructure as we developed that in the Netherlands, in my own country. And we did that by these three books over the years. And you can see that the functional classification is the first one. The second one deals with human error, how to prevent that, how to reduce that. And that is by your road design. The third one is dealing with speeds and protection against energy. And the fourth one is forgiveness for errors by road users. And then we talk mainly about safe road sites. Next, please. Based on these ideas, we make a functional classification plan of roads. And here you see an example from a Dutch city again. And here you see the different functions. Blue is the flow function, the distributors and collectors are in red, and all the others are access. And I talked about only one function if possible. And if you have done this, then you can design a route. If you have two functions for the same street, it's not so easy to design that properly. And the whole idea behind safe system is that the form, the design, follows the function, and based on that, we try to influence human behavior of road users. Next one. A critical graph in the safe system approach is this graph, and perhaps you have seen this one as before. Have a look at that. Here you see different crash types in different colors, and this is a cumulative curve where we relate the impact speed to the risk of being injured in a crash. And you see that in these high speeds, the risks are almost 100%, and that we have to go down to relatively low speeds in order to reduce the chance of being injured in the crash. And from graphs like this one is from Australia, from graphs like this, we derive that we have to go to 30 kilometer maximum if we have vulnerable road users and motorized traffic together in the same space. Next, please. I talked about safe speed limits, safe speeds, but they have to be credible as well. And credible is a matter of expectation by the road user, that they understand that a certain limit is appropriate for a certain environment. If you make that expectation realistic, then you increase the chance of accepting the speed limits. If people don't believe in your speed limits, given the environment of the road, don't expect that they obey the speed limit. So you have to create an environment where a safe speed is also a credible speed. And here you see different elements of how to do that related to the design of the environment. And if you have an interest, you can go to this fact sheet as published by my former institute. Next one. If you talk about low speed zones and you use this this idea of functional road classification, then take a map of the city and make this plan. Make this plan in which you identify which are the functions of all the roads in the street. And we did that in my country, and 100%, almost 100%, I think one or two not, but almost 100% of municipalities made a plan like this as a basis for their investments in speed limits and infrastructure investments. So then you make low speed zones, including access roads by definition, and sometimes also distributor roads, where you go to distributor roads or collector roads with a speed limit of 30. And what to do next is dependent on your resources, you have the funding for it, what is the view of the stakeholders, and whether you can include other goals as well. Next, please. Adequate interventions are critical. We know that just changing speed limits doesn't impact a lot. So you have to do adequate interventions. And I've here listed a couple of them, not just engineering treatments. So these are options that's not in your hands most of the time, but they are important. And that's the reason why I list them. The next one, please. We think about interventions on engineering treatments. And yes, that's a very good option, but it is costly. And that's the reason why if you have a network, you would like to have lower speeds, how to do that. And then you can make it simple by doing nothing, or you can make it advance by investing a lot. So that's a big issue in many investments. And here you see a couple of these approaches. And I gave you the example of Amsterdam because they decided for the majority of roads and streets in that city, 80% of the road length, to make it is 30 kilometers per hour. Also for collector and distributor. And they understand they cannot make these engineering treatments. And that's the reason why they do their measurements, speed measurements, and based on that, they decide whether or not to take additional actions. Next one. I talked already about the idea of including stakeholders, and that's critical. And here I have a recent publication by Eugenia Keller from Argentina. And in her PhD study, she was addressing this issue of stakeholder engagement and support for speed management. And I recommend you to go to that article and see what you can learn from it. Next one, and that's my final slide, I think. Yes, here I have the key takeaways from my presentation. And I have addressed them all. Too high speeds are a major road safety problem. Even small reduction in speeds will have a positive impact on road safety. Lower speeds will positively affect urban life. Safe speed management is a central activity for the safe system approach. Safe and credible speed limits supported by adequate interventions are the core of speed management, also on non-arterial roads and to protect our vulnerable road users. I would say that 30 kilometers per hour should be a maximum default speed limit. Create big low speed zones and include distributor collector roads in that. And the stakeholder alignment support is critical for your success. Thank you very much, and I apologize for taking 2 minutes more.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Fred. Now we have a pause for questions, but it's really an inclusive presentation we heard from you today, Fred, because it's, low speed zones or non-arterial roads really cover most of our cities, and it can be very complex to get all the nuances between the different functions and needs for these roads. So I'll invite our attendees, our cities, to start preparing their questions. You can either write in the chat or raise your hand. And while you get those questions ready, we have one quick question for you in a Zoom poll. So in speed management on non-arterial roads, do you think, based on what you know and what you heard today from Fred, do you think any of this is feasible in your city? Do you see potential for implementing low speed zones in your city? The options are not feasible, or limited potential, so you can see it feasible only on some suitable locations, or there's high potential, but the approach needs some adaptation and support. Is there multiple suitable locations that you see you have identified and you know for a fact that you'll be able to implement? Or lastly, there's strong potential that all of these interventions will be applied to all non-arterial roads on your streets. So I'll give you a minute to answer or start looking out for questions. In the meantime, I do have a question for you, Fred. So our cities are, working on different parts. Some are working on school zones, some are different type of roads, some focusing on arterial roads. But what would be one quick advice you would give to our cities that are trying to do something quick, tackle these non-arterial roads areas, something that is quick, not costly, as a first step before they get into the details of interventions and all of that? Is there something they can just do as a first step?
Well, I'm not that pessimistic about the potential for this, and I base that on experience elsewhere in the world. There are a lot of cities in the meantime that implementing interventions related to low speed zones. And the reason for that is that there is a request from citizens. There's a request from schools. There's a request from parents. There's a request from businesses, meaning that it's not just the government or a municipality or a board having a good idea and going to citizens and saying, okay, I have a good idea for you, please buy it. No, these people are requesting it. And it's more requests from citizens to have speed reduction on these non-arterial roads than they have an interest in arterial roads. So there's a lot of interest in many cities in the world of dealing with this issue. And then comes the question, of course, do I have the resources and funding to invest in that? As we know that just putting up signs is not changing a lot in human behavior. And that's a matter of priority setting, and that's a matter of policy making. And that's a matter of having good plans and trying to find the money for it. So basically, I'm not pessimistic. If you can try to include your citizens in this way of making your city more livable and safe.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, this is a great reminder for our cities that there's always something they can do. And as much as this topic can be overwhelming and tough to tackle, but there's always potential for an entry point. I see here a question from my colleague, Irina. Irina, do you want to say your question out loud?
Yes, thank you. Thanks. Big thank you for this great presentation. I have a lot of thoughts in my head now and very different approaches than I thought before. And one question that I have is like, what if the street has a mixed function? For example, some function transitioning from one to another. I can imagine a street that may start as an access, then it becomes a collector, and then finally it's flow, and after a certain distance, it becomes collector back again. What would be the approach? Should we split these streets for speed management by section, or select the lowest possible function? Are there any approaches for this? Thank you.
Yeah. So the idea is that if you have such a categorization of your network, of all streets in your network, that you know this is a flow function, this is distributor or collector, and this is access, that the next step is that you link speed limits to these different roads. And what you describe is exactly what we try to do. So if you have a trip, you come from your origin, then you have an access road, then you go to a distributor, then to a flow, back again to a distributor or collector, and back again to your destination. So that is what is logical. And what we learned in the meantime is that people fully understand the logic of this build-up network. And they also understand that they have to accept different speed limits on different roads. So it's not counterintuitive what people have to do. Now it's what they expect these days. And they fully expect that in the final part of that trip, that they have to slow down and don't go very, very fast. So I would say it's natural to build up a system like this. And the problem is that we didn't design the system so far in many cities in the world in which we decide, okay, we give 3 functions to the same street and the same road. And now understanding that by doing that, we complicate design very much and we increase risk. So we have to go back to the origin of a street network and the logic of a trip you just described. And I think that is the basis of making progress in improving safety.
Thank you, Fred. I see a question here from Christine Cynthia Kayungu from the city of Jinja. Christine, would you like to say your question out loud? You prefer I read it?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
I don't know whether my side it's evening, so I don't know whether it's morning, afternoon for the rest. But yeah, my question is, if, for example, thank you for the presentation. I saw the importance of inclusivity, and my question is, if the road is kind of narrow, but also busy, and then you want to consider the aspect of inclusivity in the designs, how do you go about it? How do you handle such a scenario? Thank you.
Yeah, that is the issue for many cities. The combination of access and collector. If you talk, for example, about a shopping street, where you have shops alongside the street, so you have people crossing the street because there are shops on both sides of the street, and at the same time you have fast-moving vehicles in that street, and you don't want to have that because that's risky. Even if you have high volumes, because if you have high volumes in the shopping street or in a residential street, then you have a problem. The first question you have to ask yourself, can I get rid of traffic in these streets because they belong to another street? So that's the first question. Second question, if you cannot do that because you have both functions in the same street, then the option we have chosen now is to reduce travel speed, meaning that you have a collector or distributor, not with 50k per hour, but with 30k. And that has a different design than the same street with 50k. So the 30k for those streets where you have a lot of vulnerable road users and traffic, through traffic, then you have to slow down in that environment. And I can assure you that will have a big debate in your community.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Christine, for your question. We have two more questions in the chat. One from Miguel from Querétaro. Please, Miguel, go ahead and read out your question if you'd like.
Hi, hello. Thank you for the time. Very interesting presentation, Fred. We have a question about how long does it take to develop a safe speed management plan? And the second is, how does public transportation or public transit play an important role in achieving safe speeds and achieving the mobility goal?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question. Both good question. It is, let's say, the time needed for making a plan is not that much. That's a matter of weeks. When you think about getting it accepted by the stakeholders, that costs you more time, because the city will look like different if you go alongside this way. And there will be big changes in the city if you accept this. So that's you and I recommend very much that you have the conversation with your community, with your stakeholders about that. And there's a lot of logic behind this approach, and you have to explain that to your stakeholders and to your communities and citizens. So it's not a lot of time, but having the conversation with the wider community will take time. Then your question about public transport. What is the speed of public transport in 30 km per hour speed? In my view, that is 30. And public transport is not only happy with that, because they say that makes public transport more expensive. If we can drive 50, then we have less buses or whatever than if we drive 30. And nevertheless, it is the price to be paid for this approach. And public transport in access roads, that's not a big issue. Public transport on collector and distributor roads, that is sometimes an issue, especially when you make them 30 km/h streets. So you have to compensate companies for that. And if you talk about the free public transport, as you have in some of the cities in the world, so it's not a company, but it's the individual driver run his own bus, then you have to say you have to slow down in these roads where we have that speed limit. So that is a question. That's not only for public transport, that's also emergency services. They will have the same question. We have to go fast through our network, and if you bring us to less speed, then we have a problem. We have that conversation in all cities where we have speed limits lower than 50 or 30. So that's not new, and it's acceptable at the end of the day of adopting these speeds to the important lower speeds in those low speed zones.
Thank you, Fred. And Miguel, I see also a question from Anibal from Rosario, also similar on implementing speed management measures on public transit corridors. Anibal, did you have anything else you want to add to this, or was it answered? All right, thank you, Anibal. Thank you so much, Fred, for your great presentation and tackling all these different topics and answering all our city's questions. Now, let's move on to our next speaker. Please, next. We will have Sonia Aguilar, who's the Regional Coordinator in Latin America from the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety. Sonia will be tackling one specific type of low-speed zones or areas that are in non-arterial roads, which is school zones. She'll be talking about safe school environment projects in Colima, Mexico. From her presentations, you'll learn how to use a phase-based approach to speed management, also how to collaborate between the different sectors in your city, and lastly, the different practical tools for safe speed planning, enforcement, and community engagement for school zones. Without further ado, Sonia, we're very excited to have you with us. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Siva, and good morning and good evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining from. My name is Sonia Aguilar, and I want to thank my former colleagues of WRI for this invitation. And during the next few minutes, I will be sharing with you this school environment project that we developed in the city of Colima, Mexico, between the year 2018 and 2023. This project was supported by funds of the Bodnar Foundation and carried out by WR in Mexico and with collaboration of the URSP. The general objective of the Global Road Safety Challenge was to address road safety local problems that affect children in medium-sized cities around the world. Next, please. Unfortunately, well, this is a brief of our project background, but as you know, unfortunately, road traffic crashes are known as a worldwide pandemic and are the leading cause of death of children and youth between 5 to 29 years old. And in Mexico, this scenario wasn't different. It was the second cause of death among children and youth from 5 to 39 years old. And in our city of case study, that is Colima, the rate of death was among the average of the Latin American rate, and it was 10.2 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants, sorry. And the main motivation of this project was not to develop another urban mobility project, but adding a safe mobility project to respond to the problems that the city faced. and to protect and guarantee the rights, the needs, and the aspirations of vulnerable population, that in this case was children and youth. They weren't part of this type of exercise, of planning exercise before in the city. Next, please. Regarding our objective, well, we will be wishing to achieve well-being and healthy and safe, sustainable environments for young population between 10 and 25 years old. And you may ask, why did you establish 10 to 25 or not 10 to 20, etc.? And the answer is that we identified, based in historic data of road traffic crashes, that the target population was among this range of ages, and that we want to highlight that safe mobility was a key enabler for fundamental rights, and by this we mean education, health, and recreation. The phases of this project, this project was developed in 2 phases. And the program defined that also during this first phase, we need to tackle a specific risk factor. So we focus on safer speed as the heart of our program, and we developed 3 components to address those safer speeds. So we added a safe street component that was basically to showcase how infrastructure can shift safe mobility in risk locations. Also, we had a component in order to adopt this as a local regulation rather than to have it as a local project or a showcase. We wanted to be part of a public policy in a new regulation code. And also, as Fred mentioned, and I believe that's something very important in this type of projects, is that we engage community through all the projects. So we address local road safety problems that affect children in this first phase by having a showcase of infrastructure. And in the second phase, you will see that we shifted a little bit the scope for 3 components. One was like, now that we have safe routes to school or safe environments, we can promote safe and sustainable modes like cycling and walking to school. The second one was like, some of these cool locations were completely inaccessible for many of the students. So we promoted different modes of transport, in which we mean also having the school transport, accessible school transport for all our users, and evidence-based enforcement, since we lacked of good quality data to enforce this type of programs in other municipalities of the same state. Next, please. During the first phase, we started with an assessment. Next, please. So as I mentioned, we started by showcasing that streets could be redesigned based in speeding down. So we highlighted to the population that streets should be safe for everyone, with special attention in areas where we have the most vulnerable populations commuting. In this case, we identified through a spatial diagnosis that we had 4 main areas in the city that concentrated road traffic crashes during school days and school schedules. And we carried out this showcase in 3 phases. So the first phase was to assess the problems that we identified in this selected school area. The second phase was designing and testing, and the third phase was making a permanent redesign solution. So these are the 3 photographs that you have in this slide. And during the assessment phase, we developed different studies. So one of these was to have a baseline of the speed measure of this average speed that we have at that school environment. And something very sad, but it was revealed through this study, was that 100% of the motorists were speeding in front of the school entrances and exits. So this means that no one respected the speed limit, yes? So we are talking about an arterial road that has had a posted speed limit of 60 kilometers per hour. And when I say no one was respecting the speed limit, this means that we have speeds over 100 kilometers per hour around school environments. So through these studies, we could document that behavior of motorists, and we also developed different traffic counts, cycle counts, and pedestrian counts. And we identify, for example, with these pedestrian counts, and it's very important to visualize our pedestrians around this type of projects, is that 6 out of 10 pedestrians were children during peak hour. So this was a very strong argument when we got to authorities to request to download the speed limits in order to prioritize the population that were around these streets. So that was the first part of the assessment, having this strong data to have the attention of stakeholders, but also to start connecting with the community. So during designing and testing, during the second photograph, that we developed a tactical urbanism exercise in coordination with the school community and based in local community exercise. We collected their needs and desires, but also we link our efforts with local universities to develop different scenarios of blueprints that we presented to the community. So basically, this is the blueprint that won during all these consultations with the community. And after this, we implement a tactical urbanism exercise for 1 week. This exercise allowed us to also add some speed bumps, plastic speed bumps. So you can see there is some paint and crosswalks, but at the same time, we implemented these plastic speed bumps. So with that, we could achieve an average speed of 25 kilometers per hour. So after having these results as part of this process, we developed the final intervention. That is the third photo that you're looking at. And well, this was like a permanent solution that was constructed by the government agency, by the Public Works government agency, and includes some traffic calming measures as a raised crossing and crosswalks and reducing lane width, etc. So we know, as it has been mentioned before, that for each 1% decrease on speed, we can achieve big impacts in reducing injuries and deaths, and that's part of the Nielsen model. In this case, after 6 months of permanent interventions, we show a reduction in 90% of the average speed. And well, this helps us to showcase that through a safe school environment project, we can redesign safe speeds, but also address safer streets for all. And next, please. And some lessons learned from this first phase process for each component. So in starting by the regulation and enforcement, well, in this part, we developed a lot of efforts with the state government that was responsible of regulating the speed limit. So they published this new regulation and approved a dedicated speed limit that was defined at 20 kilometers per hour around school environments and other urban equipment such as parks and hospitals. So this was a quite good win for all, because it was stated for the whole state, not only for this municipality. The main challenge here was to gain the support of the 10 different municipalities, because each one of them can define their speed limit. So after they have different political parties, and they understood road safety issues in different ways. So that was a big challenge, that they agree on having the same speed limit for all the municipalities, because this will be addressed for all the schools in this state. For this, I can recommend that it was key to develop a strong communication bridge among decision makers and different governmental levels, to get their support, to get their commitment, and to link these to specific components and champions that we find in each of the municipalities. Regarding the second component, the one I described in the past slide, the permanent redesign infrastructure addressed 20 kilometers per hour, was implemented among these main roads. So we reduced overspeeding for more than 80% in this section of the corridor where we have this infrastructure redesign. And the biggest challenge there was to make things happen, because maybe not maybe, the mayor agreed to have the tactical urbanism exercise, but after we showcased that it was successful, he wasn't willing officially to promote a permanent intervention, and convincing the mayor was this big challenge, because it implicated that it had to be developed in a main road, which used to have 60 kilometers per hour. So we were reducing 40 kilometers per hour in that road. So we required him to accept this and decrease the speed limit, which he did. And I think that's a very important challenge always to have in mind, that we need to convince our decision makers from the beginning of the outcomes and outputs and the benefits of these type of projects. And finally, the community engagement. In the component of the community engagement, we address to engage local community, for sure, the school community, parents, children's caregivers, but also media and private sector. They play an important role in this solution. So after all, the challenge we face in this component was to create a common understanding of the problem, of the overspeeding problem around school environments, since through different pools and surveys we identified that people didn't have this problem in their minds. So that's something very important, that letting people know we have a problem, and that's why after some clear messages, communication efforts, the program started showcasing and benefiting also some of the arguments through regular meetings, and through building trust also of the activities we were carrying out through all the project. Next, please. And well, as you can see, all the efforts, all the efforts that we did were multi-sectoral collaborations along the project. So it included, for sure, local government at different levels, municipal and state government. It included private sector, which donated us different materials, for example, for the tactical urbanism intervention. The collaboration also of different NGOs. You can see here the GRSP, the Red Cross, WRI, but many of us collaborate in this project. And for sure, and very important, the local community, which had made these projects successful. And nowadays, we don't need a police officer in front of this school entrance, because more than 2,500 students are benefiting from this intervention after years that it has been implemented. Next point, please. And well, the second phase is more about tools. And regarding our efforts in the first phase, we identified that in order to scale this type of programs or projects, in other schools, it was important that authorities, stakeholders, and technical teams have the proper tools to develop their analysis tasks. So we have two options there: to develop a design guide or to develop with them some digital tools around information. So what they selected was to have support in structuring a tool that could allow them to develop this in an easier way, in a more automatized way. Next, please. And this is part, and many of these tools are part of the planning stage. So they lack of this budget allocation in the municipality because they really don't have like enough resources for basic items to develop this planning or managing of this type of program. So what we identify is that any kind of support around tools, around digital tools, should be something that could be very reliable, that could be intuitive. So you don't need to be the expert of road safety to develop this type of assessments, that the information could be accessible and very transparent. This means that anyone could access to it if you were a university student or if you were working for the municipality, you can access this information. And for sure that it could be a open source development because it will allow us to improve this tool over the time. Next, please. So stakeholders and agencies a lack of this good quality of road traffic crash data. And in order to continue the school safe school environment program, we require this data to be of good quality and available and to prioritize their efforts. So the challenges that we have during that phase of developing this tool was we have continuous staff turnovers in the municipalities and in the state. So even we develop a lot of capacity building around how can you conduct an assessment, then we will have new people coming, and then we will be losing a lot of information there too. We have a lack of software license, so they didn't have always internet connectivity, for example. So this was a huge challenge in order to continue developing assessments. And well, it was very common that they lost information or they didn't have indicators around road safety, or in this case, road traffic crash data or speed data. So what we co-created with them was a geographic information system that served as a repository. We facilitated them the development of a statistical and spatial analysis in an automatized way, so they can carry out it automatically, and the information was transparent and accessible for all. Next, please. So after this, after we developed this tool, we gained the support of the state governor. So she launched the app, and through her support, we access to deploy training and workshops and capacity building for all the technical teams at all the municipalities, particularly for police officers who are the ones in charge of attend the event when it occurs. And all this information was based in a website a solution that was accessible for all. Next one, please. So the second phase of this project was that, as I mentioned, we have a lot of underreporting. So a small part of all these road traffic crashes were collected by road authorities, but when they try to link them to other type of databases or processes, they were unable to link them, and there was a lack of knowledge of the registration of the process. Basically, they didn't have a protocol for registration of road traffic crashes. Next, please. And well, I will go a little bit quick here, but regarding the enforcement, we knew that these challenges of underreporting and not having basic equipment, and that they weren't developing strategies and plans evidence-based, was based in the lack of having an integration of the information, but also because they didn't have the support around having available tools for them. So we define with them an intuitive and standard manner to develop this. So first we develop this process on paper, and then we address that into a digital way so they can access and record the information and characterize the road traffic crashes. So what we achieved there was the information was recorded and saved before it was underreported and lost. Through this open source, we tailor local policies that were needed, and through having all these informations integrated, we could successfully georeference the complete number of records that they received. So after some period of time, we identified that with good quality data registration, we increase the number of injuries registration in 300%. So the problem was, as you can see, underreporting invisibilize a lot of injuries in the city. Next, please. And well, the key steps here that we follow was mapping and understanding traffic police officers' processes, then developing the assessment and testing the improvement of any digital solution that we were thinking about, and then they were having a useful app for the police department. So we have all the data integrated there. Next, please. And finally, inclusive and community participation. And this, as you remember, we were talking about child and youth and how this program will benefit them. So what we identified is that in order to have the participation of students above 50 years old to 20 years old, we need different dynamics and different ways to communicate with them, different communication channels. So through the ethnographic studies, we identify which channels were the ones that they were using. So they were using TikTok, they were using Instagram and different digital tools. Through a mapping exercise, is a digital mapping exercise, we also recover some of their insights around road safety, but also around personal security that they identified during their journeys to school. So we match all this information with the hotspots of that we have of the city, and then we identify the riskiest hubs that students transit during their daily journeys. And well, we also develop this tool so they can map all this information and they can update it. Next, please. And as you can see here, this is a timeline, and I think it's a very extensive timeline. I won't give so many detail around it, but I want to showcase that even though we think about starting a safe project around school environments, this has a lot of impacts around our communities, around other projects. And to change this paradigm of showcasing something and having tactical urbanism to making a regulation and to establish a policy, then a lot of efforts, collaborative efforts must be done. But if I need to highlight something, is that through demonstrating that there was a risk around school environments, and through speed management, we could address this redesign. And then you can see here in the timeline near 2020, we all all remember COVID-19, but that was the year when in Mexico it was approved the right of mobility. So the right of mobility was an enabler and an accelerator for this program in order to support all these improvements around tools and about capacity building for technical teams in the municipality. So for scaling up, it was needed a lot of coordination, active community participation, communication strategies, capacity building, and tailoring tools. So this was based in the goodwill of decision makers, in the trust of the capacity of the technical teams, and in the commitment of all the stakeholders I have mentioned. And finally, and just to close, some takeaways and next, please. So as you saw, our entire project has focused on promoting safer speeds, but by emphasizing reduction of speeds on our roads. And this slide highlights the major points. So road hierarchy must be updated, as it has been mentioned. Structured data allows us to walk the talk of safe mobility. Since now we have reliable and accurate data, there are different scales of mobility projects, and for a project to be sustainable, it must integrate safe infrastructure and safe speeds. And one of the major challenges that we have in Latin America context is that to guarantee the financial sustainability after a grant has finished is co-creating system solutions. So this is very important because through this project, we strongly believe that these efforts will transcend independently if we have staff shifts or not, and if we have electoral process or changes that take place mainly related with political issues. So having capacity building is critical in order not only for training, but for improving all our processes. And next. And to conclude my intervention, well, I want to emphasize this is the international framework on how to address road safety. But when we look at promoting healthy, safe, and sustainable mobility, we can develop it from the bottom up. So this is one of the results of this project. The Bonar project has documented that we supported the amendment of the Constitution in Mexico. So with this project, we impacted in this amendment, which established a nationwide speed limit of 20 kilometers per hour in school environments. So this showcase at a local level could raise up into the national level to inspire them and to make this change in the amendment. And this change also marks the intention of speed management in school environments in Mexico, which if we address these safer speeds, we will be benefiting more than 30 million children and youth in their daily commute in around Mexico. So 54% of them walk, and we know that they face difficulties, they face different road risk, and mainly it's because we have inadequate speeds and inadequate infrastructure. So now the challenge is to materialize the right of mobility on the day-to-day basis and to update traffic regulation, to train technical teams, to redesign and enforce these processes will make easier to achieve this right. And thank you very much. Next slide, please, for your attention, and happy to receive any Q&A that you will have. And well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sonia. It's really impressive to see all the change and the impact that happened in the last few years, going from cars speeding next to schools over 100 kilometers per hour to lowering to 20 kilometers per hour. It's true, it's a process that takes time, but it's always good to start somewhere, and you can achieve little by little, even how we saw from the case in Colima, even when there's no budget, there are things to do and tools to use. We have very few minutes for questions, so please go ahead, raise your hand, or type in the chat if you have any questions. In the meantime, I'll ask you, Sonia, same question as I asked Fred. What would be one advice you give to our cities if they want to tackle a school zone? They have the school zone first that they'll be implementing in their city. What is the first step that they have to do to make things easier?
Well, I think starting in the main location that your community identifies as risky is the best way to develop it. Why? Because you don't need to convince them that there is a problem. There's already an identified problem by the community. So in many cases, we start with this huge research around something, but people know where the problems are located. And when we say involve your community, involve civil society, but by this we mean like start where you already know that the problem has been there for a long time, enough time so people have been raising their hand to highlight there's a problem and no one has made anything to change or shift that. So if it's a transport hub, if it's a school environment, if it's a park or a public plaza, then start with those locations. And in many places in our regions, these locations are, not in the downtown of the city. They are in perimeteral areas, in arterial roads, and we need a lot to be shifted in safe infrastructure around that. This is a case of school environments, but and we know it's a good way to start the conversation around lowering speed limits there, because at least in this project, no one opposed to address a safer road design. But we know there are some locations that have higher risk than this, for example, in that state.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I see here a question from Christine. I'll read it out for the sake of time. Christine is asking, in line with stakeholders' engagement, did you have a stakeholders' engagement plan?
Great question, Christina. Yes, we developed first a stakeholder map to identify the responsibilities and also the interest that our stakeholders have in this program. And after that, we developed this engagement plan with them, and we engage different ministries. So we didn't engage only the Ministry of Education or of Public Works. We engage like the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Transportation and Mobility, and also other agencies that were in charge not of planning or implementing, but of managing information. So these agencies were engaged through all these other ministries. So yes, it's very, very important to have this stakeholder engagement plan through all the project. Yes.
Thank you, Sonia. And one last question from Irina. Curious if you had strong opposition from drivers and motorcyclists against changes you made near the school. If yes, what was your approach in resolving their resistance?
Okay, for sure we have resistance, but I think that during our planning process, we identify like to have key champions that communicated first the problem. So we didn't implement only the tactical urbanism solution, but before, like 6 months before, we have a communication campaign in radio, we have social media posts, we have like stakeholders like sharing there was a problem on overspeeding around the city and particularly around school environments. So people start participating in those conversations. And when we have the first implementation of the tactical urbanism, we have some parents that were really lacking of information around what was happening. But after we have some materials to explain, and I believe this is something very important, like police officers were the front face of the tactical urbanism implementation, and many people of the school community came to them and asked them, why are you doing this? And we need, that's why I highlighted, we need to work a lot in capacity building so police officers can clearly explain what is happening. And also in regards of like the information that we share for citizens, that was the information that we gather from these community exercises. So yes, we have opposition, but at the same time, we have built through the project support. So when this opposition came, many people, not only the ones that were promoting this intervention, supported the intervention.
Thank you, Sonia. And I see another question from Miguel from Querétaro. I think you answered the first half already on the role of media, but we don't have time to go on the rest. But please, Sonia, welcome to answer in the chat as well and continue with others the conversation in the chat. Thank you again so much. And let's move forward to our last part of the session. Next. All right, now our next meeting will be also in 2 weeks from today. This last couple of months have been intense, but this is where we want to put in all the bulk of our training and all the information while you're working on identifying your locations and identifying and brainstorming the intervention. So it's important for these to be close together to allow you to have better and wider understanding of the different tools. So our next meeting, our next session will be more of a feedback webinar where you get to share with us your progress on your intervention ideas. We'll also have some time to talk about community engagement a little bit more. Between now and then, please go ahead and register for the 101 feedback sessions. These will be starting tomorrow, 1-hour sessions to allow us to discuss with you your speed management intervention ideas. Also, you'll continue to work on defining your long-term speed management goal, and that's the goal citywide, that your intervention will be kind of a first step to achieving that goal. You can also join office hours and feedback sessions to discuss. Then you'll continue to define your intervention idea. You'll be discussing with us, as I mentioned, brainstorming. Please bring any ideas that we can work on together, even if you're not sure. If you have several ideas, you don't have to be bringing kind of a finished product. Also, in the next couple of days, you'll be getting an intervention plan template. This will help you shape out your intervention ideas into a step-by-step plan. The first draft will be due November 7. And we'll have specific office hours for those starting October 24. But once you receive the template, you'll be able to also bring in any questions about it throughout the feedback session earlier. Lastly, please continue to work on building political will and obtaining the letter of support from your mayors. These are again due on November 7. So I know several of you are already starting these conversations. So please, if you have any questions or need some support, again, please come to us. We're happy to support. Those who might have not started this conversation, we definitely advise you to start. This process might definitely take some time or some convincing. So please work on that. Next. As usual, before we let you go, we have a couple quick polls. We'd like to hear your feedback, and please be as honest as possible on these, because these help us to advance our webinars one session after the other. So the first question is, how satisfied were you with the content in today's session, from not satisfied to very satisfied, please let us know. And the second question, do you have any feedback or suggestions for the next session? Please type those in. We won't be looking at the results, so don't worry. You can share everything you're thinking about. And lastly, if you have any other questions you had in mind and you didn't have the time to discuss today, or just thought about after this session, you are welcome to either type in the chat right now or reach out to us in the email address in the next slide. Next, please. You'll see our email address that all of you are familiar with by now. Please reach out to us with any questions. We're happy to respond to those right away. Again, thank you so much all for attending and for listening. And thank you again to Fred and Sonia for joining us with their valuable presentations and all their precious time. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon.